threaten the real?
Okay, whenever I think of simulations, I think of like reality TV and magazines and how they can make us like think that people are, I don't know, more beautiful than they really are. And so it makes us forget that like we are beautiful, and so we just like put makeup on and try to look like that person like, in a magazine or TV show. And I agree with you on that, but like I think about like TV shows like mostly MTV just because their shows are crazy, but like 16 and Pregnant and like Jersey Shore, they make it like seem okay for like kids our age, like yeah, it's okay to go out and drink and like get pregnant and like there's nothing wrong with that, and it kind of like changes your views and like morals in life, but I think they like create a new reality that contradicts like the true reality that we see or that we don't see. I don't know, it's confusing.
I think I understand what you're saying with that. Like you said, with those shows, it makes people think it's okay. And being, I guess, our age, we're so impressionable that instead of realizing like, okay, you shouldn't go out and do this. Like you were raised differently. You do the exact opposite and say, okay, I'm going to go try this, and then like saying. You keep trying something. Like, okay, that wasn't so bad. Then you do it again until it becomes a habit. So, which isn't right. It's kind of because you get the impression that what you're doing is okay, and it's not. It's not. It's not. It's not. It's exactly opposite of what you should do.
How does that threaten reality? It threatens morality.
Mm-hmm.
How does that threaten reality?
How does it threaten reality?
Mm-hmm.
Because actions that people wouldn't ordinarily do in reality, that by seeing these different shows, I said they do think it's okay. So instead of just fantasizing about it, they will commit to it and make their actions real.
Trey, Kristen?
I definitely think simulations threaten the reality because, like, if you look at shows like Jack, I mean, I'm sure y'all know what I'm talking about, and they do just stupid stuff. They just do a bunch of stupid stuff, but they probably have trained professionals by it in case something happens. And then you see you see videos on the internet of people doing stupid stuff like that all the time, just like trying to be funny or see if they can be tough or stuff like that. But they don't have anybody there to watch them, and if they get hurt, something bad can happen.
Okay.
Yeah, I know sometimes, there's a lot of YouTube videos that are hoaxes and stuff like that, so it threatens reality because it can, yes, convince people that some things that are possible aren't possible. It threatens real because they think that, oh, I saw this on the internet, it's real, but it's not.
I think a lot of today's technology helps facilitate that a lot more than it did in the past. Now we have like Facebook, internet, YouTube, reality TV shows that all facilitate like images that aren't real, they're simulations. And like the in the allegory where the like puppet master is controlling the shadows, the people behind all those reality TV shows and Facebook are able to present those simulations to us, and it really does threaten our reality because, like on Facebook, that's our perception of what a friend is. A friend is someone that likes your statuses and posts pictures and comments and stuff, and when in reality, a true friend is much more than that. And so simulations do threaten the real through technology.
I think simulations threaten the real because can't have them both at the same time. Like on one part you have simulation, and on one part you have reality. And you can't really have both at the same time. I mean, we've all heard or even used the phrase, and then reality set in. You know, it's kind of like when you have a simulation, eventually reality is going to catch up with that. Like, for example, my mom and I, believe it or not, watch The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. Just going to get that out in the open. I love it. But, no, it's a great show. But any of the stars on that show, like I've seen them on talk shows and everything, and every single one of them say that on that show, the producers just set it up to make it look like they have this different character than who they really are, or the situation was different than how it's portrayed on the television show. And actually recently that caught up with one of the characters. There was a couple on there that were kind of in the midst of separation, and her I guess husband, ex-husband, whatever, he ended up killing himself because he felt like the show had done so much damage to his real life and things like that. And so that's a point where reality set in, where the simulation just kind of faded away because reality is always going to pull through. So that's why I think simulation's set in.
I think maybe what you just said was a little contradictory, so I'm going to ask you for clarification.
Yeah.
You said simulations threaten the real, but reality always sets in. If reality always sets in, then how will a simulation threaten it?
Because then you won't be prepared for when it sets in.
Oh, so it threatens your perception of the real. It's
Right.
not that it threatens the real's existence. It threatens your perception of it and makes you not prepared for it. I see. Thank you for the clarification.
So I'm not talking about my outside source. It's called Reality, What Does It Mean? And it's a psychological paper by Lewis W. Brandt and Wolfgang Metzger. And Metzger is a psychologist, and he believes in or he doesn't believe in but he is a Gestaltian psychologist, and Gestalt is where like perception is more than the parts of the whole, or more of the sum of the parts. And he, in this paper, he and Brandt identify the parts of what is real, and things that we would count as simulations are one type of reality, but we don't perceive them as such. Like, they exist, so they are real, but what they do to the reality that we perceive and we feel and we experience is that they kind of blur the lines between the two. And so if we have, the two give an example of a psychological experiment conducted by Masco and Brooks in 1961, where a patient was put in a room and told that they were talking to a therapist on the other side of a wall, and really it was just a recording, but the patient talked to it and established a relationship with the video recording and felt like it had, like the person had really, really improved. And there was a lot of like progress done through that, and the whole time in all the sessions it was always a recorder and the person never knew. So that's a simulation that was interpreted as reality by a person. So while like a simulation is a form of reality, it threatens what we perceive and what we understand as reality, and it gets us to the point where we don't understand what is real in the experience wise.
Can I ask about that experiment? The patient felt like the patient had improved
Oh, yeah.
through the course of this supposed therapy?
The patient had, well, I mean, he knew he was in an experiment, but he didn't know what the experiment was.
Mm-hmm.
So he didn't know what part of it they were testing.
Mm-hmm.
And in his reports, he talked about how, or he or she, because I'm not sure,
Mm-hmm.
the patient talked about how he or she felt that he or she was improving greatly.
Emotionally, in terms
Yes.
of the therapy was working.
Yeah, it's kind of like the placebo effect.
Right.
So
Right.
those are simulations.
I kind of took a different approach to it. I kind of went biblical with it, but like you were saying, how men control, or not men, but like people controlled that tape recording, and it was a simulation. I found a verse in Isaiah, and it says, "The Lord says, these people come near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Their worship of me is made up only of the rules taught by men." And I thought
thought about how Plato's allegory in the shadows in the cave, like Donovan said, with the puppet masters, they're all controlled, and like worship, like they're saying here, is it's being controlled. It's not being it's not true, and it's not coming from their hearts. It's not. It's made up by rules taught by men. It's only what people are being expected to do, and they're not. Their faith is being simulated. It's not true faith. It's not reality.
And does that threaten real faith?
Yes.
Alright, well, we talked about like how does simulations threaten reality. What I thought mainly was that like on MTV and when they like on the Jersey Shore when they go out and party and drink and they're not upstanding moral citizens like they should be and like do good things. To me, it seemed like simulations threaten reality because kind of it can replace what we think is right. Like it replaces our reality with this simulation. So I guess our reality is hurt because like we start to take on the characteristics of the simulation.
Which is sort of like what Michael just said.
And I bet the stars of Jersey Shore and stuff are affected by the simulation too, because I know like one of the stars on there has been repeatedly parking in handicapped places and has gotten thousands of dollars of fines, but because on this show he can kind of cut loose and do whatever he wants, now in reality he thinks he can park in handicapped places and get away with it. So it probably has, I mean, obviously it does have, like, the simulation of the reality show itself might make the star think that it is their reality, what they see, you know, when they're recording the TV show, that everything that's really produced is now their life. And so on a show where you can do whatever you want, you might come into reality and try to do whatever you want and it doesn't really work out.
But is that because of the show or because of like the accolades received for being a part of a television program? Because stars doing whatever they wanted has been around as long as there have been stars.
I would say it's both. It's a factor of both, because if, you know, it's certain kind of things that they do on the show. Like I said, on the show Jersey Shore, I've watched it a few times. They just kind of run around, do whatever they want. And there are tons of stars who don't just run around and do whatever they want because they're stars. But I guess the stars of that show specifically feel like they have the right to do that because that's pretty much what they do for a living. And it might blur the lines between, you know, this is the TV show and this is your real life.
That brings up a point, if I could ask this question. What is the difference between a reality television star and a dramatic, so, you know, like an actor or an actress? Is there a distinction there that's sort of following up with what you just said, Emma?
Well,
is one a dissimulator and one a simulator? I don't know, I'm just asking.
for reality television, a person is playing a version of themselves or a almost a caricature of themselves, while in a dramatic show or something, even if a character is cast as themselves or a cameo, like Neil Patrick Harris does tons of cameos in like almost everything he does, but they're dramatic and no one really expects him to act like that. Like in the Harold and Kumar movies, as dreadful as they are, no one expects Neil Patrick Harris to act like he does in the movies because everyone knows it's scripted. But for a reality show, even though it often is scripted or at least scenarios are set up, people accept it as being real because it's called a reality show. And I think it's just the name itself that's put on it makes people think that it's reality, because when you put a name on something, it makes it more real.
And most of the time it's like in their houses or in like places that you go, like
In a home
yeah.
setting.
Does that blur the lines then?
So the dramatic performance and entertainment is, I think what we're trying to say is it's a dissimulator, because like in Baudrillard's quote, he calls it dissimulation pretending, and he said it leaves reality intact, which is what the dramatic stuff does. necessarily falsified, but like everyone knows that what's going on is scripted and it's made to be just for entertainment, purely entertainment, not meant to portray real life.
Mm.
Yeah.
But in reality TV shows, the goal of the shows is to portray real life for the sake of entertainment, not entertainment and using real life to entertain. But so the simulation is the reality TV shows, but like drama, which is openly like everyone knows that it's not real, is a dissimulator. And I found something Baudrillard said about Disneyland actually. He said Disneyland is a town which is nothing more than an immense script and a perpetual motion picture. And so I thought that was interesting because the guy that was talking about simulations threatening and blurring the lines between what's really real and what's a simulation talks about Disney World or Disneyland as just a giant simulation, and it's threatening reality by blurring the lines of I guess it blurs our expectations for all simulations blur our expectations for what we want out of reality in TV shows and through Disney World and Disneyland. They set up false expectations for what reality is really like, and so when we experience reality and it's not like what the simulations tell us it should be like, we get upset, and that's how it threatens reality. We can't really cope with it.
Mm.
That makes me think of like when you portraying life through reality TV. I thought of like some video games like Sims and Life, where you're virtual and you portray a life as a character. Then your reality, either you're disappointed because your perception of reality is altered because that video game can be your reality. So that's one of the approaches that I found with simulations, and then talking about technology and fantasies, like Michael said.
It's like, does life imitate art, or does art imitate life?
A lot of people find their identity in video games. Like that's all
Mm. Alternatively, do you find your identity in Facebook? Or the voice that you use to tweet? Your affectations? Do you take on affectations in your alternate reality?
I mean, even when I'm writing a paper or working on anything where I'm writing, I find that my style is a lot different than if I was just talking, because I want people to see me as intelligent. So instead of talking like I normally do, in which I ramble a lot, I try to hone in and I try to focus, and I don't repeat myself as much as I do if I'm just talking. So that's like a simulation of me and my writing, but it is a part of me, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, because just because a simulation, it threatens the real, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing for the real.
Is it a simulation or a dissimulation?
I think
Because you have to acknowledge, this came up yesterday in 6th Hour because there was still some confusion, and there may still be for y'all. You have to acknowledge that you ramble in order not to ramble. Does that make sense? So that's a dissimulation. You are making the conscious choice to not do something that you know you do. Right?
yes.
Whereas with a simulation, there is no real, and you're just putting it on and trying to convince yourself or to fake that there is a real. So I think it's maybe not as a simulation. I think it's a dissimulation. Does that make sense? Y'all want to follow up on that a little bit? Anybody have any ideas?
The Truman Show, where he didn't have any spoken moral codes, but he didn't do anything wrong because he didn't know there was no way to tell whether it was right or wrong because nobody had shown him. Nothing had been done to so he could learn from it.
We were talking about simulations online. Kind of reminded me last year when we did the cyberbullying thing, and it talks about how when the kids go online, they're a totally different person. They simulate this different persona, and they use that persona to hurt people and do it to make themselves feel better. But then in the real world, they're different. That's funny.
Like when Emma was saying, when reality sets in about the man committing suicide. That's why I think a lot of children have committed suicide because of the cyberbullying thing, because these other teenagers, kids put on the different role of simulation through bullying, and so then that's their reality, but it affects the true reality of someone else.
Right. And when the media and stuff talks about how tons of kids have committed suicide, children who watch that and who watch the constant threat of terrorism or the constant threat of war or the continual mind-numbing effect of all the horrible things going on in the world that are constantly broadcast on news stations, children are brought up thinking that that's what's to expect. If a child gets bullied, it sees stories of kids committing suicide, and it feels like it's okay. It doesn't really sink into them that suicide is an end, not a means to an end.
Yeah, I feel like some parents, like with the news and all that kind of stuff, some parents want like young children not to watch that, and they don't want them to know. They want them to be excluded from that. They don't want them to see what is actually happening. And I think to an extent they need to see that, but I agree, they feel like it's okay. And if they keep watching it and learning about these stories, they feel like they think it's the norm, and it's not.
So is it bad to keep your children from the news?
Well, one thing,
I mean, that's a very black and white question, but what happens? What's the, go ahead.
Alright, well, I kind of had a question too. One thing
Okay,
I thought
good.
was like, is news a simulation? Like, are we seeing the real thing, or are we seeing what they want us to see? That's one thing I thought before, like, I don't know, so I guess, I don't know.
I think they twist some stuff just to make us more interested in like what they're trying, what they're portraying.
It's like some people on Facebook take off all the bad pictures, so all you see is just perfect pictures with no flaws. So another thing I brought up, when you can change reality anyway.
So Josh, whenever you go to a news station, there's always different people presenting the news, and those people have different ideas and beliefs, so they'll want to support. Like, they might want to not talk about like their party messing up, or in politics, or not talk about the war or something like that. And there'll be a bias.
CNN and Fox are like
Yeah, that's
complete
what I was
opposites.
thinking.
Yeah.
They'll definitely like I guess twist up and be biased, like you said, towards top.
But I mean, that way you're more informed. You have two, like, our
Way
way
back.
back.
Well, are
You
you
have two
though?
different.
But
One thing
I would say so, because I watch both of them.
Well, if you watch, but you have to, what do you have to do? You have to choose
Yeah.
to watch both.
And you have to choose one to believe. You can't believe two opposing views.
I mean, and
I mean, you can.
You don't have to choose one to
You
believe.
could also choose parts of each one, because each one might not be the whole truth, but it might have part of it.
Like, but how do you know what's the truth? It's like a buffet of what you're taking for reality. I like this, I'll put them together. When you're not, like, you don't know if that's what actually happened because you weren't there, you didn't experience it, but your reality is, okay, well, Fox News says this, but it's a bit too conservative, but CNN is a bit too liberal for me. I'll just find a middle ground, but you don't know if that's what actually happened or if that's what's happening in the world. It's just your belief because you don't have an unbiased source, and there's not an unbiased source other than maybe your own experience, which I guess can still be altered.
Well, one reason I thought news may have been a simulation, because like it seems like you can get the same story on like CNN or Fox, for example, and then like what they make of the story is two different things. So that's one reason I thought maybe news was a simulation.
And that's why it's like so dangerous, and we're talking about like the kids, like it kind of sets a precedent for how people act in certain situations. Like in this bullying situation, some kids think it's an okay outlet to commit suicide, and that has in large part due to the way media has presented it. And in the Truman Show, the God character Kristoff says we accept the reality of the world with which we are presented. And so, like with parents and stuff, you have to be careful about what reality is presented to your children, because at that young age, that's where the reality is formed. And if they accept whatever reality they're presented with, you have to watch what you present them with, because it'll be kind of set in
And that way they
stone
can
from that
control it,
point
and
on.
it's like a simulation. Yeah.
It's amazing to me how like the internet and media has kind of become like this barrier or this median between a person and reality, because like someone who cyberbullies through Facebook or whatever is probably not the kind of person who's going to go up to your face and say that kind of thing. So it's almost kind of like with the mask project we did last year, it's like because they have Facebook, because they have cell phones to hide behind, and that acts as their simulation, they can be this completely different person, but when it comes to reality and being face to face, they never do that kind of thing. And it's not only with bullying, it's also with like I don't mean to be rude or anything, but like within the past 10 years, a lot of guys have become cowards because they'll like text a girl and ask her out or something, or ask her out over Facebook, but they would never actually do it in person, if you get what I'm saying. So it's not only with bullying, it's in a lot of fields of life.
Well, does that, and it's not just in dating. Do we do this? Do we text when we should call? Do we call when we should visit? Do we send an email when we should write a handwritten note? What has the medium done, the selection that we have of mediums, done to the real interpersonal communication? Some would argue that it's threatened it, some would argue that it hasn't. And that's what you can choose to do. I mean, that's one way you can narrow down this question, is just in the interpersonal aspect of it. You know, you can go at it from the psychology perspective, from the news media perspective, from the interpersonal communication perspective. You see, you have a lot of options for this. You don't have to talk about all of these. You can narrow your focus, which is part of the article that you read last night, right? Yeah? Anybody have anything else to add? I think the bell's about to ring.
It went off of what Emma was talking about. With the internet, you have so much information, and while a lot of it is stuff that's falsified, there's a lot of really, really true things on the internet, like psychology journals, and there are copies of websites published by psychologists to spread information that will have like lists of symptoms, and because of that, they were finding that when they would diagnose someone, their symptoms would typically get a lot worse because they would go out and research it, and they would see a list of symptoms, and if they have a generalized anxiety disorder, they see facial tics, and they're like, oh, I must have that, so it becomes a part of